what's up, dude?
I miss hugging your neck, man.
I know. This is extra fun because I could probably throw a rock 3 times and hit your house from here. You know, if I like threw it and then like went to the rock and threw it again a couple of times.
Bet,
My short
throw,
game's killer. Yeah.
Bet I could throw a football over them mountains. Coach put me in, we would have won state.
And we're trying our best to be respectful of the idea that we probably shouldn't be hanging out together, person to person in the same room, even though that's kind of like the foundational element of this whole thing that we do together.
Yep.
Yeah, so, surprise, you're still listening to TuneDig somehow. So yeah, Kyle, you talked me into doing this, and I'm super down and excited about it because I think we both agreed we didn't feel like this current situation would really lend itself towards whether we do it well or not. We definitely try to do those normal episodes really well, especially now that we get a chance to do it in a real studio, do a lot of research, spend a lot of time talking to one another, have a real conversation. This can't be that. So you really sold me on a new idea, and I'm really, really stoked to do this with you.
And I appreciate your openness. Yeah, I mean, when we started this thing in general, it was an art project, right? Like we just wanted to do something creative with all this vinyl that we were amassing, working with record stores and like a couple of punk rock kids. I don't think we ever had any inclinations of like starting a podcast that would be sponsored by Blue Apron, and we'd be like trying to mount the charts with Dax Shepard. This was just a creative exercise for creative exercise's sake. So I feel, and I know you do too, really protective of keeping what we refer to as the body of work pure, right? Like everything is a document that, and we're starting to see it, which is really exciting, where like people will Google an album where they want to learn more about it, and then we appear somewhere in the search results. And by virtue of, I think, picking really interesting records, we get included somewhere in the conversation for a good number of people, and that's been really exciting. So I don't want to, like you mentioned, take away from the process that we have created, that I feel like has been pretty successful, and we're being really mindful of how we handle that.
Yeah.
We've also been talking a lot about like what role music even plays right now when we're stuck at our house. We can't see live music. I know you are totally jonesing.
I am at once more in love with music than ever, and also so tired of it I could never listen to it again.
Because live gives us the different moments, the new stuff, right? And we can't get that, so we're stuck with recorded documents and watching vertical phone screens of Orville Peck in his living room, which is great. I mean, I'll take what I can get, and he's amazing. And a lot of the people that are doing the living room concerts are really great. Shout out to our buddy Trey Vetter doing the 6-man series. But it's just not the same, right?
Right.
So trying to be really intentional, equally intentional about what's the right thing for this moment. And you joked like we live 3 stones throws away from each other. We're a quick bike ride or a walk away from each other's houses. So we're like message in a bottle's distance, it feels like right now, right? So it's time to do what we did to stay connected as much younger men and make mixtapes, right? I think like a fun thing we used to do when we were umpiring baseball is we would talk about one specific aspect of music and just kind of go off on tangents. So this idea was inspired by kind of our roots, getting to know each other as friends and music fans. So the idea is we give each other a prompt. One person gives the other person a prompt or a theme or something, a rabbit hole to investigate. And then the other person comes back with 80 minutes of music, 80 minutes in honor of the old CDR constraints. We're showing our age. And really constraints are needed because otherwise we'd be making 3 and 4 and 5 hour playlists, and it's just disrespectfully long.
Yeah.
So it's a good exercise in seeing what we have in common, seeing what we can still teach each other at this point, and to be able to break from the kind of bounding boxes of one artist, one album, kind of one snapshot, and spend a little more time with our breadth. as music fans.
Yeah, I think like two major things I've been thinking about that'll come out differently this time, and especially important, I think, for anybody checking us out for the first time. This is going to be substantially different in a couple of ways. One is, like you mentioned, we go really deep on an artist, and we pick an album, but we always end up on some kind of scale between was the album the important thing, was the artist the important thing, and the album was kind of a highlight of that. Was there kind of a mixture of those two in history that we want to talk about? And we do our best to really do research, go really deep. And as much as we try to avoid, we like to say to one another, we try to avoid conjecture. It's almost impossible, right, but we try to just not be two more people giving opinions about everything, especially in a longer form podcast, which it's kind of become. So this is going to be different in the sense that we're not going to try to go that deep into any of those particular rabbit holes, or even maybe not try to teach each other so many new things per se, as opposed to just that kind of raw discovery like you talked about that we kind of used to have. It wasn't really about convincing the other person or teaching them anything. It was just more like, I don't know, man, here are 14 songs that seem to go together in my head. Let's see what you think about it. And we also thought it might be helpful too, because as opposed to focusing on that album, you're going to get artists, albums, songs that we probably never would have talked about otherwise, because they don't sit in a context that's important enough to spend all that time and energy on, right? So it's cool because me and you get to share a little bit of those, like a sprinkling of a song here or there that we otherwise never would have tried to share too much about. And because we're trying to keep it from being a 6-hour like hardcore history podcast, we're going to try really hard not to talk for an hour about everything. So that'll be the two main differences. So yeah.
That last part is the part I'm really most excited about, because you've known for a long time that that's the kind of music fan that I am, right? It's like, I love contextualizing music, and this is more about contextualizing music rather than like kind of doing the anthropology of a thing. It's almost the opposite in that way. And I'm fanatic about this, right? Like, I'm forever making playlists. I have hundreds of them on Spotify. And we were talking about when we started the project, the kind of tech project that predated TuneDig. We did a launch party for that website, and we had some of our friends' bands play. And I made a special house music playlist for each of them, like before, while they were going up. So this kind of thing is special to me, because this is how I think about music entirely. And if anybody wants to hire me as a music supervisor, please listen to the next few episodes of these and consider them my body of work.
For what it's worth, one of the things that sold me on this is you and John Asante used to have a radio show on it's gone through so many name changes now. Album 88. What was the actual call? What were the call letters? Was it WABE?
WRAS.
WRAS, that's right. So you had this blues show, and I'm telling your story now, but I've only ever listened to one radio show in the history of my existence for the purpose of the music, and it was you and John Asante, and you showed me that being able to pull out individual songs, give them themes like you guys did, talk about them briefly, but then mostly let the music speak for itself, was something I've never really seen. And to be honest, I still don't see a lot of, even with all the internet radio stuff. So to me, it's fun to be able to have an opportunity to kind of replicate that a little bit. And then secondly, something that wasn't around back then anyway, now we can put all this stuff we talk about on one big playlist, and people can go listen to it and figure it out for themselves. And that's a really cool thing that we couldn't have done otherwise. So I'm stoked.
Let's provide a public service.
Absolutely.
We are not normally going to do this, I don't think, but we are starting with the same prompt just for a little A/B testing, and just because we both really liked the prompt. It's really broad and all-encompassing. We started with favorite instrumentals. A deceptively simple place to start. So that was your suggestion. So do you want to like shed a little light on that?
Well, I'll get my own episode, so I'll shed some light on mine there. But I mean, I think a good snapshot into our probably Ridiculous is the right word. Like, level of care about music and the specifics of it all is just the fact that we had an actual conversation about what the definition of instrumentals would mean inside of this context, and still
Yeah.
managed to walk away with two totally different ideas, basically, of what they would be. But I think as you can tell a little bit about the songs you're about to walk us through, you can kind of show the contrast that you have with how you interact with instrumental music, as opposed to me, who, I spent a lot of time learning to play music really specifically, learned a really specific instrument. And as you'll really clearly see, like, that'll bring out an aspect of what I enjoy about music specifically without vocals. And it ends up focusing on guitar a lot, but that expands out. And then I kind of have, some other more eclectic ways I think of looking at instrumentals, but we'll get into more specifics for me later on. But I think what's most important to walk away with is we did give ourselves some parameters to kind of define what
Hmm.
this actually meant. So for you, what does this look like on your playlist?
Yeah, I definitely kept it a little looser, but the first conversation you and I had around it was like stuff that is intentionally instrumental, like as the thing that artist does. Um, it makes it kind of a thing to exclude. So obviously most jazz. You mentioned post rock and post metal. Um, I think the main thing, and in so many ways, the things that you and I listen to, like I always think of you as a right here guy with the way you listen to a lot of stuff versus I'm here. Um, for me, instrumentals are all about things that create a vibe or a texture. Not necessarily background music, because I listen to a lot of the things on my playlist very actively. But for my impression of yours is that it's a lot more about the structure and the composition and the notes and the progression. And mine is just about like what kind of world does it build? What kind of mood does it create? Um, some of mine are very songy, like yours, but some of mine decidedly are not.
Yeah,
Um, it starts off with really songy stuff, and then I think it gets more vibey as it goes on. Um,
I love it.
I
I've been spending some time listening to your playlist a bunch. So, including walking around the post-apocalyptic grocery store earlier this morning. Uh, so, so yeah, I'm really stoked to dig into them.
The back end of this playlist would be weird in a pandemic grocery store, I think. But the vibe starts off really good and positive. And,
Yeah.
going back to the idea of being a music supervisor, instrumentals, I think, for me, are the thing that, like, they always go to that place that a song with words can't. I don't mean to be trite when I say that, but like, when I hear an instrumental, I'm specifically thinking about the visuals that are associated with it, right? Like that's where the narrative comes from relative to an instrumental track. So my number one favorite instrumental ever, forever, and probably one of my favorite songs of all time, period, is Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs. So we talked about Otis Redding pretty recently, being one of the all-time Stax Records cats. And Booker T and the MGs played on Otis Blue, the record we talked about. And that particular tangent was a thrill for me because I'm a huge fan of Stax Records, of Otis, of Aretha, of Sam and Dave, of all that stuff. I love Memphis music, old and new. And you know how much I love like 3-6 and all that stuff. But I got to sit at the organ in the A room at Stax Records where Booker T. Jones played Green Onions. And it was a little bit like putting my hands on the sword and the stone. Like I could feel the lightning. I don't remember if I heard it in the Sandlot or when I heard it for the first time, but I was like, this is the HOV lane of feeling 10 feet tall, right? This is like penny loafers, and you put on your good shirt and you go out on the town and you strut. Like this is a strutting song. And it vibes so hard that it's an immediate attitude adjustment. And that's why I really, really like it.
So in these episodes, we won't have to introduce them this way every time. But for everybody listening, so what we actually recommend here, if you can, hop on over to Spotify or something else, grab the playlist and actually spin the song here. Like we want you to treat it a little bit more like a radio show you can interact with. If you're listening on the podcast, we'll play that 30-second clip, right? But thanks, intellectual property law, we can't play the whole thing on the podcast. So hop over to a digital service, hop over to YouTube. We'll try to put the playlist there as well. And that way you can actually hear the song, go all the way through it, and come back and let's talk about it a little bit. So this is Green Onions.